Who's up next? Now we're going to be talking about mining. The mining industry is, you know, groundbreaking, growing so fast. The next is a panel. It's called The Evolution of Mining, and will be soon here on stage. Adam Beck, Vladimir Hozjan, Čapek, Paolo Ardoino moderates the panel. Bob Burnett, welcome on stage.
All right, good morning, Prague. Very excited to be doing this panel today. This is a very accomplished group of gentlemen that are joining me today, and some of the biggest minds, frankly, in the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. So today our theme is the evolution of mining, and I thought maybe the right starting point for this would really be where we are today. And so I'm going to start with you, Jan. When you look at, you've been around mining for a long, long time, and you've seen a lot of things happen. How would you rate the technical maturity of kind of the entire mining landscape today?
Right, so basically now we're at the stage where we're competing with companies like Apple for the manufacturing space at TSMC or Samsung. So this is the level of technology being used in the silicon, in the mining chips, in the machines. As for the actual miners, which I mean the participants who buy the machines, this has been very much professionalized. There are huge farms in the US all over the globe, and the level that the industry has reached, I would say, approaches to the same or similar standards as we have in regular data centers. So everything has been professionalized and scaled up, and this seems to be the long-term way how the mining can work profitably.
Yeah, very good. I think that we're at a point, too, where there's some separation of what happens at the individual level versus maybe what happens at the corporate level or the enterprise level. Maybe not unlike what we saw in the personal computer industry, where you started to see those sort of specializations. Paolo, your company represents a very global company. When you look at the geographic diversity of the mining landscape, what do you see? It was almost exactly 3 years ago that we saw the China mining ban, for instance, happen, and a lot changed since then. Where do you think we kind of are in both the positive and the negative in terms of geographic diversity?
Yeah, so Tether, since 2 years ago, announced that it would invest a significant amount of money in Bitcoin mining. There is, for a company like Tether, there is always the interest, of course, to have exposure to Bitcoin. I think that you know, more or less we have around an exposure around to 90,000 Bitcoin as of today as a company. But there is always the question: should we buy Bitcoin or should we mine Bitcoin? And it's kind of tricky, right? Because I think it's, from the pure profitability point of view, it's probably always better to buy Bitcoin, right? Just buy Bitcoin and get exposure through that. You take it, you put in your self-custody. But in the end, if you are exposed to Bitcoin, so if you bought Bitcoin, you want also Bitcoin to be protected and successful. And in order to achieve that, we thought that the best way was to try to reduce mining centralization from the geographic point of view. We started with China up to 2019, and now a huge amount of Bitcoin mining happens in the US. You know, you can pick whatever you prefer, but it's not the right thing to do, right? It's, as we profess decentralization, and yet we end up always in being centralized in the places where the electricity is cheaper or is just easier to install and bring bring hardware in. So we started going, let's say, against the flow a couple of years ago. We started investing in Paraguay, Uruguay, El Salvador. We are looking into different places in the Middle East to try to push governments and educate governments in understanding how valuable would be joining the Bitcoin mining race. Now we are seeing how Trump also supports that from the US side. But you never know from the pure geopolitical side, you don't know if in 4 years, let's say, government will change and they will be against Bitcoin mining. And if you have like 60–70% of Bitcoin mining in a single place, that is going to be really, really problematic. So we are actually focusing and investing a lot of resources in finding companies that have already operations in Central South America, Middle East, Asia, and certain parts of Europe, so that we can help them to grow their mining operations, providing additional liquidity.
So I would take it that President Trump's statement yesterday that he'd like to see the remaining 1.3 million Bitcoin mined in the US would not fit with your agenda.
I think it's great that he's saying that. I think, of course, is, you know, in part is a political speech, right? But
of course.
It's great that he's saying that, because it's important to give comfort to miners in the US that they will not be shut down from one day to the other. But at the same time, although it's great, we cannot be lured into thinking that it will be like that forever and that is going to be sustainable. So we need to look at you know, other places in the world. And there are great places. Paraguay has like 14 gigawatt dam. Uruguay as well have a lot of hydro. So the opportunities are out there. It's just a bit more difficult for a company to approach those countries rather than just pile on the US.
Sure. So Adam, this next topic I'd like to have you take a shot at. So we just went through the halving, and I think if you look at kind of the landscape of at least the public mining companies, it's been pretty poor, frankly, for quite some time. We went through Q1. I think we saw some little bit signs of life from some of the companies, but the reality is, do the math, post-halving now we're sitting at about $15 billion of annualized revenue for the industry. And as somebody who's been here also from the very inception, do you look at that as a healthy number, a number that we need to see grow? If that number doubles, what happens? If it gets cut in half, what happens? I'd just like to get your thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, it's a dynamical system, so you know, people were looking at the halving to say that would make miners unprofitable, but what they were neglecting is that from the the bear market a couple of years ago, the mining profitability, like the Bitcoin price went up more than the hash rate, and more than 2 times, so that more than offset the halving. And so, even though the halving, reduces the profitability, the hash price or the mining profitability is better now than it was a couple of years ago. But I think there are some kind of overhangs, which is during the bull market, people bought a lot of ASICs, a lot of miners, because they were surge priced. There's a shortage of them, so people bought ahead, and then they got left with the inventory. So once they have the inventory and it's a sunk cost, they'll keep putting it online. Mm-hmm. So we're still going through that. So there's still excess mining inventory. So it's going to take the price growing faster than the hash rate for a while to get the miners to a better profitability state, and then it will absorb the inventory, and then they'll be buying new miners again. So it's really in a cycle, and of course the price can move a lot more quickly than the hash rate, because the hash rate has to build out megawatts and megawatts of infrastructure, wait for supply chains to manufacture miners. So there's usually a lag, maybe a year's lag on building new power, and a 6-month lag at least on building more miners. So it's just part of the cycle.
And would you see, in the case of, let's take 2 extremes. We're sitting at roughly this $15 billion annualized number right now, based off of the roughly a $70,000 price. Because price can move faster than hash, if we saw that number turn into half tomorrow, what would happen? And then Same thing if it doubled. I'm just curious about high-level observations.
Well, I mean, if it halved, I mean, I guess you saw the halving rate. So what happens? I mean, we got to experience that effectively. Now, people knew it was coming, of course, but ultimately, people take miners offline or they upgrade them to more efficient ones, and maybe some companies stop mining. So generally speaking, the hash rate will fall because at any time, all the miners currently mining need to be making a profit or they're going to stop. So it will adapt relatively quickly. And of course, it's a lot easier to turn a miner off than it is to build the infrastructure, turn a new one on, and manufacture new machines. So I think what tends to happen when the price runs faster than the hash rate, you get into a sudden bull market period, is that the people currently mining make a lot of money for 6 months until the inventory comes in. So, and that creates an incentive for new participants, for people to expand the infrastructure.
Yeah, I know as someone who runs a mining company myself, I think those periods where that happens are really where you make the whole thing, right? It's kind of survive and then wait for that to happen, and then survive again and wait for that to happen.
Well, I mean, on the other side as well, if there's something geopolitical that turns off some miners, so you mentioned the China mining ban, for people who were mining at the time, that was a windfall. Right? The hash rate dropped, not for an economic reason, but for political reasons. So if you were mining got a lot more profitable for, I don't know, 6 months or so until the miners were relocated.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things I found, we talked a little about geographic with Paolo earlier. So Vladimir, I want to come to you though. While there's a lot of activity within the Bitcoin community, there's a lot of technology development in Bitcoin in Europe, there's virtually no mining, or close to no mining itself. What do you see as the impediments to changing that? And does it present risk to Europe itself?
There are two levels which we must look on. One is political, other is also political, is the energy prices. The Europe itself and its politics, it's not towards the mining, they are against it because of the green and other agenda, and Bitcoin community often prove that Bitcoin mining can be green, but unless this changes, I don't see in Europe. There are some projects in the north which are okay, some in Switzerland, but otherwise there is very little. There are no big facilities like in States, like in Middle Asia or China or somewhere else. So.
Do you see any hope of lobby efforts or momentum to change the political appetite?
There are some initiatives, as I'm aware of, and I hope they will do their best so that we compete for as a Europe compete for who will control so that nobody controls the whole hash rate. So this is one of big risks that can happen. This can be either Russia, either States, either China. So it should be spread out throughout the world so the Bitcoin is safe.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Many of you may not know me. My background is actually from the personal computer industry. I was the chief technical officer for a company called Gateway, which was in the 90s and 2000s, one of the bigger personal computer companies in the world. And one of the privileges I had, or the things that really made my job easy, was I had a lot of choices. I could choose different processors, different chipsets, different graphics processors, etc. But we're currently in a state, as I look at the industry, where we have very few choices. We have a market dominated by Bitmain and MicroBT. So I want to kind of open this one up a little bit. I'm hoping everybody can have some comment, but maybe I'll ask Adam, because I know you had the purchase a few years ago of Spondulis. You've talked about, hopefully, I think all of us are rooting for you to bring out some alternatives. But maybe we could start with, what can we do, what can we hope for to kind of open this thing up a little bit and create a more competitive environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already improved a bit you know, from the situation where Bitmain was larger percentage-wise. I mean, MicroBT, we shouldn't forget, is itself new and you know, makes very nice miners in a lot of ways better than the Bitmain ones. And there are new players now, right? So there's BitDeer, so Jihan Wu is back in the game. We're making a miner, so we have a shuttle run that we have in hand for a miner with some interesting optimizations, and Block is also making a miner. So there are more entrants, and there are, if you ask around the industry, there are some other companies who are, you know, not necessarily making a whole miner, but you know, they're specializing in making a fabless design or something like that. So there are more entrants around. And of course, what counts is sort of, you know, the performance and the accessibility, availability and volume. So, you know, that's still concentrated, but the inputs are there to make that bigger. For a little while, Intel was making ASICs, but they seem to have dropped out. I think that's due to just the overall company profitability. They cut back some kind of pilot project kind of thing, so that division got cut. But yeah, there are more, and it's on a good trajectory at the moment, let's say.
Yeah, Jan, I know you've got some things happening. Maybe you can.
Well, one thing to realize is that the very only component in the whole miner that's not commoditized, is that an English word, is the ASIC. That's the problem. You cannot come to an electronics part shop and buy an off-the-shelf component that will replace it. And there is no incentive for the players in the industry, and I'm specifically referring to the leading players, to sell these components at volume and at a price that would make economical sense to the build miner from that. Speaking of which, yes, for example, us as Brains, we built a small machine that's built on top of the Bitmain chips. You can check out our booth. But that's sort of a proof of concept, and it proves that we can build it at scale. We can produce a control board. We can deal with the PSU. We can deal with all the manufacturing issues. Because one thing is doing a prototype or a few miners, but if you get into hundreds and thousands and so on, then the manufacturing is a completely different game. So we as a company are also shooting in that direction. We want to be one of the companies, even though there's no real mining in Europe, that doesn't mean that we should not be providing the shovels for mining, which are the mining machines and the whole software stack and so on. And having the firmware on our side, we thought it's a logical extension. So, but back to your question, or what you mentioned, I'm not sure that the industry can evolve into something like a PC style where you have a bunch of vendors who are building the machines from available components, because you can do it, but you will always hit the wall with the chips, because it makes no economical sense to really sell the chips in the market unless we would create something like a consortium. Let's call it an ASIC foundation. There were some efforts back in the day, a few years ago, started by us in Satoshi Labs, where the chips would get designed and manufactured for cost plus, and then somehow distributed throughout the industry. I'm not sure about the exact model, but this is the actual problem, and we are really talking about 4 nanometers, 3 nanometer chips, which means we're competing with big players like Apple, and that means also capacity in the foundries and all that support and so on. So that's the problem, and I am seeing there is more and more players, including us, who are also playing with the idea of developing a chip for exactly these reasons, because we are not able to source the chips at a price that would make economical sense to build large-scale mining products on top of that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something I think very important. Maybe we can use it as a little bit of a transition, which is AI, and that I have some experience in chip design myself, and have been working with a chip design company, and everybody's competing for today it's the 3-4 nanometer class. Soon it's going to be the 2 nanometer class, and our industry, which is we may kind of sit here today and think about it as a big industry, is really a a tiny little industry globally compared to everything. We're a hair on a wart of the global demand for instance, for wafers. But I see this kind of interesting relationship between the AI community and the mining community starting to emerge. I know, Paolo, you guys have done some work kind of venturing toward AI. Do you see that as an opportunity to do something synergistic? Do you see it as a competitive force? How do you view that?
Yeah, I think that AI is, in a way, it requires data centers, because if you are in the business of being an AI infrastructure provider, we recently announced our investment in Northern Data. There's a company also here. They have been involved in mining for quite some time. And they are now setting themselves up as one of the biggest AI infrastructure providers. They got now 24,000 H100 GPUs from NVIDIA, so it brings Northern Data as one of the top players in the field in terms of a number of GPUs. And the interesting part is not only about competition for the wafers and allocation for producing chips, but also competition to access energy. Right now, everyone is, everyone from the US to China, everyone is much more excited about AI rather than mining. And so you have all the investors of all the mining companies and in general VCs that would give you money more happily if you were to use that money for AI rather than for Bitcoin mining. So it's three things: access to chips, access to capital, and basically access to power. And energy will become much scarcer. In a way, the fact that energy and chips will remain scarce for Bitcoin miners might not be a bad thing, right? You could assume that the hash rate will go to a plateau and the profitability of miners will be sustained anyway, right? So, but I think we are going to see these two words clashing a little bit in the future. The more money and investments, probably in the trillions of dollars, will be poured into AI development.
Great. Well, time is ticking on us. So I'm gonna shift us to a different area. I'm gonna start with you, Vladimir. We look at the pool environment in the mining infrastructure. There are, I didn't count it this morning, but typically there are, if you look back in the last week or two, you'll usually see about 15 pools that have mined a block. Usually 90% of them come from about 6 of those pools. Like your comments on that, where are we? Where do you think we're going?
Yeah. We are giving a lot of thought of that. This is the world today. So now we have like 15, even not all of them are mining by itself. They are redirecting somewhere else because they cannot compete with the biggest one, with the prices of the hash rate that the miners are getting. And we see that in 5 years, there are going to be just 3 of them, or 4. And this is something we should fight against. I hope that I see some initiative, especially in the East, that states takes over. They build their own pools, and they require, like Kazakhstan requires, all the mining operation needs to go to the Kazakhstan pool. So this is maybe something that could change. I heard some rumors about Russia doing the same. I don't know, but this can be that we have more pools, more spread, so it's dangerous to have just 2-3 pools at the end, so they can manipulate the blocks and so on, so that shouldn't happen.
Jan, would you like to chime in on this?
Yes, we have recently, well, the situation in the industry is it's basically a zero-sum game, or race to the bottom with the fees. And essentially, it's the demand from the big clients who are only after having payouts based on the shares that they deliver. So basically, you're paid by the hash rate that you deliver to the pool, not related to the pool lock or anything like that, because they are typically publicly traded companies, and they don't want any variance in their revenues. So it looks better in the Excel sheets. So this has been the trend of recent few years, and all the big pools basically started providing FPPS or PPS, paper share, paper hash rate, to all their customers. And us, as one of the oldest pools, still providing only proportional rewards, so basically based on the amount of Bitcoin that you mine in the pool, you spread it among the miners depending how they participated on a particular mining round. It's a bit unpopular, and sure, it is popular within the retail small miners because they don't really care that much for the variance. The math eventually adds up, but that's not something that is generally accepted by the big players. So this is the trend in the industry, and we were one of the last ones basically switching to that scheme. But what I'm seeing as a long-term trend in this is considering hash rate sort of as an energy. Electrical energy you cannot store. You cannot store hash rate, but you can trade it. You can buy hash rate, you can send it somewhere, sell it to somebody who is interested in mining with that hash rate, and that actually creates additional margin for the miners or the intermediaries in the path. So this is what I'm seeing as the future. Sure, the problem with the hash rate being centralized in a couple of pools, then we can slowly start speaking about what are we going to do about the mining protocol. There is the Stratum v2 that we have proposed. That also has a section that deals with miners themselves providing their own block templates, obviously validated also by the pool where they deliver the hash rate to. But that's still, even though the protocol itself has been developed, it has been released. There is the SRI initiative that we are just consulting them, but it's an open source independent initiative from what we have started a few years back. But what we need is potentially pushing this implementation to the existing pool and to the existing pools. And the question is, what is the incentive for the big players to implement this? Unless there is some huge problem, I'm not sure that there's a strong incentive to do this. And yes, we all should be pushing it, we're marketing it and so on, but that's pretty much the state of the pool mining industry, the pool side.
A little discomforting, frankly.
Yeah, but at the same time, to add to this, I'm like super happy with the SV2 being in production in a way that we have sorted out the security problems and scalability problems of the protocol and the efficiency. And that is already being used. We have been testing the protocol for past 5 years because we use it for solving our own problem, and that was collecting the dev fee from BrainsOS. So it's like mixed news.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good segue to kind of where we sit with block space, and you mentioned, block template creation. So Adam, when we look at the last 18 months, we've essentially had a period where the mempools never cleared. I think I believe it's been approximately 18 months. Maybe there was a little blip, but we've seen several periods where fees have spiked tremendously, only to settle back down. But I think it kind of gives us an indication of how scarce that block space really is, and how important control of it is. And so I'd just like to get your comments kind of on this pool situation, but maybe add some of the block template and block space.
Yeah, I mean, like Jan, we would like to see Stratum v2 more widely used. I think it just needs bootstrapping with a couple of pools with 20, 30%, and that could be a Stratum v2. You need a certain amount of hash rate to reduce variance to provide good service. So if there's a Stratum v2 pool that has multiple pools behind it, that can work. At the moment, there's something else going on, which is there's some kind of, I think, ant pool organized escrowed payment, which sort of makes it even more centralized than it appears at its face. And so that really could do with balancing out by a Stratum v2, and then I would encourage people to move to Stratum v2, and then maybe ant pool will move to Stratum v2. So that's the kind of dynamic, but as Jan said, it hasn't happened yet. It needs the minimum kind of bootstrap hash rate to reduce their variance. So I'd encourage people who are mining, picking a pool or running a lot of hash rate to try and get that to happen, because until that does, there's kind of actually sort of artificial geopolitical risk that Ant Pool is taking on, and the people participating in that. It's kind of like insurance, right? They won't necessarily think about it until there's a problem, and then they'll have to do something about it. And then, yeah, about block space, I mean, I think what we've seen historically is that there are sort of layer 2 adoption and best practices in terms of, you know, batching transactions and things like this. And basically, there's a lot of inertia in software, internet software. Anybody who's been around in software for a while has seen that. And what actually pushes people to adopt some layer 2 technology or to improve their best practices, to optimize something, is the fees getting very high. And then things will change in the space of a few weeks. You know, people will take some evasive action, they'll adopt some technology, they'll rapidly develop something. And so while the high fees are, you know, expensive for users, maybe frustrate some layer 2 use cases because setting up channels gets more expensive or something, ultimately it's sort of healthy, and it seems empirically that that is the main driver of the adoption of layer 2 and efficient best practices. And I think typically, you know, there's some kind of discussion, controversy about, you know, large JPEGs occupying big chunks of the block, but it's still nothing new in the sense that in previous cycles, actually the biggest driver of high fees has been traders in a bull market. So I think, you know, as we get into the bull market of this cycle we're in now, you'll see high fees for that reason, and maybe they'll push out, you know, some of the large data kind of use cases of the blockchain.
Paolo, as a company that participates on numerous blockchains, when you look at this situation in the Bitcoin blockchain, the block space scarcity and the fees, one, do you have any observations? And two, does it change any of your behaviors or your perspective of where you're going to take your company going forward?
Well, I'm a big fan of small block space. So, and also I'm a big fan of longer block time. I think that the beauty of 10 minutes block time and you know, small block space is that everyone can participate to it, right? If you are everywhere in the world, like in the poorest country in the world, you could technically download a couple of megabytes every 10 minutes and be able to participate to the Bitcoin network. If you have a blockchain that produces 2 blocks per second, first of all, it requires a huge centralization because the problem is a physical problem called speed of light, right? So if all these nodes have to coordinate with each other and have to talk to each other to agree on which block they want to create, and so all these validators, right? So if one node is in, I don't know, Rome, and the other one is in Japan, in Tokyo, the speed of light is probably, you know, it will take 120 milliseconds to move to information from one place to another. So it creates a situation where the first time you have the smallest blip in the internet infrastructure, everything will fail. Right, so the beauty of Bitcoin is that within 10 minutes we will find routing paths that will allow the network to survive also to catastrophes. So I really like that aspect. So I think the way for Tether, especially if it is for the stablecoin market to thrive on Bitcoin, is actually look at technologies like RGB, which, you know, Bitfinex and Tether are supporting heavily and funding to continue the development and to become an important layer 2 for digital assets on top of Bitcoin. And also there is Taproot assets from Lightning Labs, right? So I think that is one interesting strategy. On the other side, you have Liquid, that is basically a sidechain created by Blockstream. So that is where we see the stablecoin and the digital securities industry growing, I think, on Bitcoin. I don't think it is interesting to have that settle main chain. I think fees in the future will become more prohibitive for just utility transactions. But the point of Bitcoin to me is remain slow, remain even expensive, make blocks scarce, and just allow to be this security layer for everything else.
Great, thank you. We only have a few more minutes. I think one of the things that I wanted to hit on today was things like hash rate derivatives and in my mind, kind of a view that as we see these derivative products come to market, they're a sign of maturity. Vladimir, do you have any thoughts on that area?
Yeah, sure. So we like to think about the hash rate as a commodity. It has the name zero-time commodity, which is basically the same as electricity. We built that 10 years ago as spot hash power marketplace in real time. So we are not a pool. So many people think that we are a pool, but not. We are the hash rate marketplace where you can sell your market, and there are buyers who are then sending to various pools, even their own, to mine Bitcoin and other coins. So in the future, I see that this is now second layer. We can expect even more products based on the hash rate as a commodity, like hedging futures and so on. So this is something where we look forward, and institutionals are looking for such products. So there is some demand for it.
Great, thank you. Timer just hit 0 for us. I have about 2 hours more of questions, so unfortunately, we're not going to get to those this time. But guys, thank you so much. Very insightful, and a pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Which way we go?
You can leave the stage that way. Thank you so much.